Hey there, welcome back to the channel. This is the Smell of Water channel, and I am Ramona, and today's Reddit little story is going to be, what is the weirdest experience you've ever had in your life? And the tagline, whatever you want to call it, I've heard a lot of these mind-blowing stories that sound so unnatural that I feel they're made up. Most of these stories were from people around 18 to 30, so I wonder if there are any weird stories that older people are willing to tell. Any stories are welcome, whether they're unnatural or not. So here we go. Ready? First one. Running into people a long way from home. Once we stayed in a national park cottage about 300 miles from our home. The person staying next door to us happened to be my university engineering professor. Another time, I was walking down the sidewalk at Vail, Colorado. A co-worker that I met in California that lived in Germany passed me by and we recognized each other. And there's a reply that says, that's just normal for New Zealanders. It's really awkward when someone says, oh, I knew a guy from New Zealand. His name was Dave from Ingvar Cargill. Do you know him? And you get all geared up to say, I know it's a small country, but we don't literally know each other. But before you can say it, you realize, oh yeah, I've met Dave. I've been all over the world, and it's near a guarantee that you'll meet someone you know, went to school with, or an unexpected related to. Being a Kiwi is weird and wonderful. This happened to my mom when I was a kid. We were originally from a small town in southern England, but when I was 9, we moved to an equally small town in Spain. Our first day at our new house, we're walking out of the front gate to go for a walk as a couple are walking down the street towards us. As they get level with us, they look at my mom strangely and say, aren't you so-and-so's wife? Turns out this random couple, walking down a random street over 1,000 miles away from home, knew my dad and recognized my mom because she passed by his work while they were there one time. I also met a guy on a ferry off the coast of Bali who was in the Navy with my dad. Small world, huh? Along those lines, I have a very obscure name, and for most of my life was the only one in the United States. When I moved to Los Angeles, in the middle of east nowhere, about 200 miles, and 150 years away from Malibu, my closest neighbor, a bit over a mile away, across a canyon, a zip code of less than 500 people, but nonetheless sharing the same mail stop, was, and I kid you not, Alan A. Hansen. There have been so many, literally wrote a book about them. Oh, well, that's cool. About getting mauled by a bear. Wow. Okay, we're going to move on from there. That one just doesn't sound right. It's mainly about information. It travels in packs. I got a fortune cookie message one day telling me that a short stranger would bring me many blessings. Next day on the street, a very short, very strange-looking old woman asked me for help finding her way back to the transit hub. She'd made a very long journey by public transit to get some medicinal berries from a herb warehouse in the neighborhood. She showed them to me. I researched them. They led me down paths that, to this day, have helped solve a lot of physical conditions that I and my wife both have. 2. A friend of mine runs a used bookstore, record store. One day, a guy came in to sell books and threw in a big stack of 1930s trading cards called Horrors of War cards, showing graphic atrocities that had taken place in history. Think of them as Mars attacks cards. He didn't want much, so my friend took them and researched them, but he didn't put them out for sale or anything. A couple of days later, one of his regulars, who mainly just bought classical music CDs, comes up to the counter and says, I wonder if you know anything about some particular trading cards I used to have as a kid. And as my friend told me, you feel the hairs rise on the back of my neck because I knew exactly what he was going to ask for. And he did. And then there's telepathy. It's real, but that's for another day. I remember driving on back roads in a snowstorm. It looked like some guy, like maybe his 20s or 30s, or was 20 or 30 feet in front of the car, off to the side of the road. But no matter how much we drove, this image looked the exact same distance from the car. It was night, too. I am super skeptic, as if someone has an explanation as, oh, it's the snow and your high beams, blah, blah, blah. I'd be very interested in the answer. Was not drunk, high, or tired. Having a $100 bill blow up to me in Sausalito. I had an NDE, and I'm not explaining it because I don't want to argue about it. Yes, I have proof. There is no hell, no heaven, but it's definitely not death, as in the end of life. I worked at a hospital in central Haiti and had a zombie come into the hospital. Reader's Digest version. This guy came in, gets admitted, and dies at the hospital. Doctor checked him for vitals and signed the death certificate. The cleaner on site nailed his coffin shut, and then the family took him and had a wake all night and buried him the next morning. 1 year later, he comes back to the family acting like a zombie. They bring him back to the hospital. The staff find his death certificate. The cleaner is called in and recognizes him. The family say he's a zombie. There is an actual documentary made on this man by an American film crew. That's a little creepy. Clairvius Narcisse, in case you were wondering, didn't know who that was. I'll tell this story. One I haven't told anyone, just to write it down as something some might find mildly interesting. For me, it isn't anything tremendously important, but for some reason, it's something I never forgot, and this was 49 years ago. I traveled with a friend to Mexico the summer after high school. We took a flight from San Francisco Bay Area to LA and then hitchhiked across the Mexican border, grabbing a bus ride, which was terrifying, to Mazatlan. Then we planned to start a month of bumming around that part of Mexico. That first night in Mazatlan, we dined and drank and then took a long walk along the seawall, where we came across some random American dude who found our happy-go-lucky stumblings about to go rather amusing. He struck up a conversation, inviting us to his place as a way to keep the fun times going. Sure, we said, and followed him down some sketchy alleyway to what was, essentially, no more than a room through a wall. It was a completely bare room. No furniture. No other doors, no rooms off of it. In it, there was a young couple, nicely dressed, seeming less on the bum than we, and another gentleman, well-dressed, but casual. They were simply sitting there on the bare floor, quite nonchalant, as if waiting for us, or waiting for the party to get started. The American dude said this to the other gentleman. This other gentleman was his guru, his Don Juan, a guru-type character from a popular book at the time. There was no partying going on, just a few stories shared about who we were and what we were doing in that part of Mexico at the time. So this gentleman, the single guy whose place it was, apparently, revealed that he was the son of some diplomat, and he had killed someone, or some persons, and he was simply biding his time, lending his magical powers to interesting people, which were, I suppose, how he acquired his sidekick, the American dude. Okay, well, we think we'll just be moving along, we said, and headed out into the dark and off to our hotel room. That was weird, we said. We spent about a month traveling through Mexico, seeing the sights, having a good time, before heading back to Mazatlan, where we would find our way back to California. Who do we run into back in Mazatlan? Yep, American dude and son of diplomat murderer, who proceeds to ask if we remembered that young couple that were also in that room that night some weeks before. Sure, we remember them. I killed her, says Don Juan, in the most matter-of-fact way, as if it was the most normal thing in the world to say, but was something I might find a tad bit interesting, and something he surprisingly was willing to share. Again, we bid a quick goodbye and noped out of there. What the hell? Finished our journey, found our way home, and got on with life. Never forgot how preposterous that was, or how less than preposterous it was, apparently, meant to seem. We never made it back to Mexico. I pulled my pickup deep into a little canyon near the Berlin ghost town of Nevada to find a sandy spot to camp in one late afternoon, and came across a little stone cabin, about 12 by 12 interior dimensions, with an open door and window. I thought, cool, don't have to pitch a tent for the night. As I hopped out, I poked my head inside to check for ants, snakes, etc. The moment I crossed the threshold, I got a feeling of deep black anger and resentment so hard it was like getting slapped in the face. I'd been really upbeat a second before, but that feeling scared me so much I hopped back in my truck and drove 30 miles before I felt okay enough to look for a campsite again. Something had told me in no uncertain terms that I was not welcome in that cabin. And there's a reply that says, we used to go ghost towning camping in places like Red Dog and Timbuktu, California, and Gold Point, Nevada. It was crazy. I realized talking about the energy of a place or feeling spirits or something is bound to make people think you're nuts. But you'd cross a line and all of a sudden you couldn't hear any birds. There'd be an old campfire with a half-burnt diary left by a gold panner full of bizarre experiences, and you'd look up and see a king snake staring at me while I was reading it. I never knew what to make of it, and I still don't. But it was weird, all right. I've written about this before, but it blows my mind. It was a few years ago. My doctor told me to go downstairs in the clinic to have a blood test. I go, and there's about 8 people waiting. We have a sign-in seat, so I signed in. It asked for my name and date of birth. When I was done signing in, I looked at the 2 names ahead of me, and each of them had the exact same birth date as mine. What are the odds? I rescued a feral kitten once who was what they call a blue point lynx. She was just beautiful, but never completely overcame her wild ways. She was playful but fierce, and would often forget that she was playing and just dig in all 4 paws. But I loved her so much. One of her more crazy moves was to sneak up behind me and grab onto the back of my leg and sink those claws in. About 2 years ago, she had developed a tumor right between her eyes and was in so much pain I had to put her down. She was 12. It broke my heart, but there was nothing to be done. Even exploratory operation had no guarantees. A few months passed, and the manager of my apartment complex told me that one of the ladies here was having to go into assisted living, but she had a wonderful cat, and no one wanted him to go to the pound. She wanted to know if I wanted him, and I said yes. His name's Leo, and is twice as big as my Boo. He was very shy at first, so I let him take his time to getting to know me and his new home. One day, not too soon after he arrived, he finally came out of his hiding place to hang out. I was in the kitchen out of the blue. He grabbed me with all 4 of his back, with all 4s on the back of my leg, exactly like my Boo used to do. I still freaked out about it. I'm not much of a believer in the supernatural, but it really seemed like Boo's spirit was still lingering, and she got Leo to give me one last hug. Leo has never done it ever since. One night in 2017, I was driving home from bartending at a music festival, listening to Atlas Shrugged on audiobook. At a red light, I pulled up behind a truck identical to mine, a '94 blue Nissan hardbody, which was unusual enough, but there was a sticker on the tailgate that said, "Who is John Galt?" I was really exhausted, so maybe that enhanced the trippy feeling of it, but I liked it. My dad died 24 years ago, now suddenly. He was in his 70s and had heart troubles, but we still weren't expecting it. He and I had a good relationship. He was always supportive. I was in training halfway across the country, so I had to get home fast to be with my mom. My husband was going to bring our son separately. I was so stressed I forgot to bring undies. Anyway, the whole thing was awful, as you'd expect. My mom was in shock. We were all distraught. The next day I took a shower and, of course, forgot a towel. My parents had an in-the-wall dryer deal where you could open and wooden sticks would be raised to dry towels. Of course, I looked to see if there was one that I could use. My parents bought crappy towels, cheap brands, none matched, but that was the weird part. The ceiling light was behind it, so the towel hanging there was kind of glowed from the light behind it. In the stitching of the towel, I could clearly see a heart pattern that was stitched, where stitching was pulled out. The rest of the towel was fine. I never told anyone, but I kept the towel, still have it, and the heart is still there. I like to thank my dad. That was my dad telling me he got to where he was going, and everything was fine. In 1969, I was living in an old 4-story Victorian mansion hippie house artist commune in Baltimore, with a stained glass window in the front door and a carved alabaster fireplace done on a horn of plenty theme with bunches of grapes and plump naked ladies in my room. One night, I was hanging out with Janice and Kenny in the next room to mine when the lights turned off, getting high and looking out the window and watching the world amble on by. Nothing much was happening until a guy walked up and paused at the house across the street, walked on, came back, put a bottle in the shadows next to the stoop, and went inside. After a few minutes, he came back out and walked off without the bottle. Not long after that, a guy dressed in a white suit with a Panama hat came strolling up, took the bottle, casually put it in his satchel, and walked on. This was too weird to just let it go, so I eased out, followed him at some distance until he turned into the hippie block with its boutiques and head shops. Now I felt at home, so I cut through the alley, ran ahead, and cut back through the next alley so I could walk back, cross paths with him head on, and get a good look at him. When I passed face to face with him and our eyes met, something about the experience, I don't know what, unsettled me enough to hurry back home. Nothing, as far as I know, ever came of it. When I was about 19, I was driving home from work on a country road, and I noticed there was traffic, which was unheard of at the time. I looked ahead up the road to see if I could tell what was going on. I was probably 6 or 7 cars away from this big old woody station wagon that had half pulled to the side of the road. There was a fire in the engine and a woman outside the car, running around it and screaming, "My babies! My babies!" just as the entire car became engulfed in flames. It was horrific, a ball of fire with a woman desperately trying to get to her trapped kids. Out of what seemed like nowhere, a man walked up to the car, stuck his hand in through the flames, and disappeared into the fire. A few seconds later, he came out carrying a baby and a toddler. Right before the explosion, I saw them strapped in the back of the car seats. A few minutes later, I was able to pass the scene. I saw the man up close. He was holding the baby, and neither had a scratch on him. He wasn't even sweating. He winked at me as I passed. The station wagon was almost just a frame by then. The interior was gone. I then went home and figured I just really must not have seen what happened. There were no cops on the scene or anything. This all happened in a matter of minutes, so it was easy to dismiss as a trick of the eye. But I did tell my dad what I'd seen. He kind of rolled his eyes and told me to quit smoking so much pot. The next day, however, on the front page of the newspaper was the headline, "Miracle on Bloomfield Road." There was an interview with the mom, and other witnesses. He said he had touched the door handle to open it, and it didn't burn him. The flames around him didn't touch him. Both he and the children were fine, not even a blister. The mom, however, couldn't touch or get near the car without being burned. She was injured trying to get in, as were others. She also said, along with the rest of the witnesses, that the man didn't come from a car or leave in one. No one really knew who he was or where he came from. There were literally 20 to 30 other people who saw exactly what I did. The mother in the article was quoted as saying it was a miracle. And for what it's worth, I really believe her. My eyes weren't playing tricks on me. I saw a man enter a car that was no longer recognizable as a car. It was just a giant fireball, and he came out completely unharmed while saving two babies from certain death. Even the fire department couldn't make sense of it, and they really tried. I don't know if he was a guardian angel or what. I wouldn't even try to know. All I know is that I saw a miracle and that many others did as well. Even my dad believed it after he read the paper, and he's an atheist. This isn't the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me, but it's up there. I wanted to share this story as it has a happy ending. Sorry, my dogs are upset about another dog in the neighborhood. So in 1998, cattle producers got angry and sued Oprah Winfrey for disparaging the industry over fears of mad cow. Oprah moved her show to Amarillo, Texas for a few months. I, for a completely unrelated reason, had been kicked out of school and was doing community service. My district-ordered service was at a local community theater where Oprah was filming her show. My job was simple. Clean up, keep the craft table clean after people used it. Simple. Ms. Winfrey came by and asked why the table was messy. I said, "Who cares?" in a more colorful way. She then asked me to leave via the back door with the help of the security team. I was thrown out the door. Jazzy Jeff style, got a black eye. Oprah banned me from her show for life. I got a letter. Kind of surreal that the most arguably successful woman in media maybe still hates me. We used to try to get a cheap vacation to somewhere warm in winter when we hit a certain point. We worked seasonally, so summer vacation was out of the question. First time we traveled was in the early 90s, and Cuba was all we could afford, and we were from Canada. We flew in a Russian plane that was pretty rickety. The flight crew also had to change how loading the plane went, as we were afraid the plane would tip over. Anyway, all the passengers were terrified. There was only rum mixed with very little Coke, embargoed, and liter bottles of beer at 7 or 14%. So we all bonded drunkenly. Turns out that many of us were some from the same complex and continued to hang out all week. One of the bartenders, Jose, had a birthday and we threw him a party. Everyone had such a great time. Jose had a 9-year-old son who hung around and played with a couple of the kids in our party. So years passed and we tried some other areas of Cuba. Then we decided to return to the same place that we had first stayed. Unfortunately, it was closed down to be completely renovated, so we chose the hotel next door. We mentioned this to Marta at the desk as we signed in. She says, "Oh, Jose used to work next door. He runs the coffee bar here." So we walked over to see him. He actually recognized us as we approached. 9 years later, he exclaimed that we all had been the best guests that he had ever had, and we did remember his son, Stefan, who was in the entertainment crew. We went to find him, and he too remembered us when he saw us. Wow, we had a great vacation and were the pets of the entertainment crew. Next year, we decided to try a different part of Cuba and go for 2 weeks. At check-in, who greets us? Marta. The chain had just been bought by this hotel, and she was sent to set things up as the chain liked. She gave us a primo room. The entertainment crew grumbled about the changes, and many had quit. The place emptied after the first week's bunch left, and we waited for the new people chatting with the crew. We find out that the chain is sending an entertainment crew from Varadero to teach their ways. The local crew was pissed off. So then the new crew shows up and sees us and recognizes us and gives us hugs. The locals are like, "Who are you?" and wondering if we were spies. So the next year, we were ready to go somewhere besides Cuba. We have a little more money and decide to go to Mexico. We did indeed go to a property in the same chain, though. We get there late at night. Our room is moldy. I wake up and can't even talk, so go down to the desk to ask for a different room. Who is running the desk? Marta. Again, it's a new property, and she was sent to set it up. She gives us an amazing room that everyone wants. We have run into people we met on vacation in random spots from far from home, but back in Canada. I spent some time living in the Navajo Nation. It's super dark out there. There's not a lot of streetlights. The road I was living on had one that was one at the bend of the road for obvious reasons. A little less than a year in, I was outside smoking on the porch, and I saw what I thought was a cat moving up the road. There weren't many people living on the road, but the house at the bend in the road did have a couple of mean dogs, and that's exactly the direction the cat was headed towards. I decided to intervene, so I went after it, trying to beckon it back with a traditional, "Here, kitty, kitty." But when I got close enough, I realized it wasn't a cat at all, but something that was meant to look like a cat. It was too dark to tell what it was, but I decided that I didn't want it coming with me anymore. I ran all the way back to my front door, and with a death grip on the screen door, watched it go all the way up the road, start rolling around in the dust, just out of range of that one streetlight, and then an old woman with a skin over her back and head crawled out on hands and feet to squat at the end of the neighbor's drive and stare back at me. At that point is when the Navajo thing living in me realized I was clutching the door and came to investigate why I was doing what I was doing. He looked at the road, swore, and yanked me inside. What I had seen was a skinwalker. I had been warned about them, but I dismissed them entirely as being just a bunch of crazy, naked old people in animal skins, ready to jump out and say, "Ooga booga." I was totally wrong. They were legitimately scary, and my mind was completely blown. This happened 20 years ago, and I honestly can say that it was the strangest, scariest, but most fascinating thing I've ever experienced. I've posted this a few times over the years. When my sister and I were kids, we were out front of our home playing near the mailbox. Mom and Dad were there at the window watching. According to them, my mother turned to my father and asked him to bring us inside. He shrugged it off, but she became more urgent. He asked why, if there was a problem, and she suddenly panicked and started heading towards the front door, despite being less than a week away from giving birth to our youngest sister. He stopped her and stepped outside to call us in, and we complied. Less than a minute later, a car came barreling down the street at high speed and struck our mailbox, destroying it. We would have both been killed instantly. My parents have never entirely comfortable talking about it. Ball lightning. There was a horizon-wide tree line 300 yards away. Above and beyond was a massive storm with a constant lightning. Silent, constant lightning. All along the entire horizon. In front of the tree line outline was the, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Kugelberts. 3 or 4 watching basketballs, bobbing and darting and floating, generally from left to right, or right to left, not changing height much, 10 or feet so up. They dimmed as they traveled on and were gone. It never did rain. This was in 1972, Wisconsin. So in high school, I played basketball, and the day before the game, the cheerleaders would put a basket in your locker. It would have candy and snacks. Well, to put it in the locker room, they would have gone through the locker, or to put it in the locker, they would have had to gone through the locker room. Their coach was a woman, so they just knocked, but from the showers you couldn't hear it. So after practice, I take a shower, and I hear a bunch of girls talking, and I freak out. My clothes are in a bag because I thought I was alone. Although I had my towel, it didn't cover very much, and I was going to a very important dinner with my family. They were there for me 10 plus minutes when I decided to just go out, and 15 plus girls my age saw me in a towel. And nothing happened. They just laughed a little and left. 2, the trainer and my school were very overworked, so she started a program to help her get stuff done. And when I played basketball, there is a game where I stretched my groin. The injury going all the way up my leg. So I was taken to the locker room and hadn't even crossed my mind that I was going to have to take my pants off. I wore a compression and they had to take that off. They left while I took it off. They walked in and pulled my pants off, not expecting to have to do it, and my down below area was through my right side of the underwear. When they pulled it down, the assistants just stood stunned as I covered it, but too late. I guess it's a weird experience. So me and my best friend were like 11 and 12 years old, and we were walking back from the shop where they have this small wooded-like area where you have to walk through to get to an open field past the lake of their house. It's always been a really safe, always been really safe and calm walking that we'd like to take. But on this particular day, we were walking out of the shop on our way to walk through the wooded area when I froze, grabbed my friend's arm, telling her to look up. On the brim of this wooded area was a large, and I mean large, monkey person-like figure standing on both legs, holding onto a tree with one arm. It stared at us for a long time, and we just stood there frozen. Suddenly, he just went on all fours and ran into the woods. We ran to her home, and we came back running past the gate. Mom yelled, "Are you okay?" Because she saw something large in the wooded area. Before we even told her of anything that we saw, not super close to their home, but it was visible from the front door. So whatever we saw, she saw as well, and it couldn't have been small if she could see it from their home. Forwarding 2 years later, we were in high school, still best friends. We both totally forgot about this, and I brought it up, and I said I'm not sure if I dreamt it or if it was, in my small mind at the time, over-exaggerated it. But as I started talking about this memory, she stopped me and filled in the details with explaining how she saw it, and we both remember this exactly the same way from how he looked and stared at us. Every detail. And fast forward to now when we were done with school, 20 years old, and brought it up again at a party the other day, again describing exactly how it happened and filling in each other's sentences. It still bothers me with all that. There are monkeys in those woods, but never ever has anyone ever seen anything that big. And there she stayed there her whole life, and we always walked through that wooded area. One time, my LED lights were acting up. Me and my sister were stumped, but then figured out it was just wrong with them and what was wrong with them and went to show her. I blacked out, or like fainted or something, and leaned against my very heavy TV, pushing it against the wall. I would have had to use my entire body strength to push it like that. I was out for maybe 10 minutes, but then I woke up, I turned around, and my sister was still standing behind me. And I asked her what she was doing there. She was like, "I just got here." And she said that I was only out for like 2 seconds. I was in my room studying, and I smelled something like pee smell, and it went on for days before I told my parents and started mopping the floor for me. And after that, it was still smelly, but I looked at the trash can and saw a yellow liquid when I lifted the trash can up. There was a whole puddle of pee there, and I thought it was a stray dog or cat peed in my room and left, but I was wrong. I have a 7-year-old brother who I am convinced is not all there, and he's very desperate for Robux, so he tried to fake bribe him, saying, if he says it's him, I will give him Robux. Then he admitted it was him. I tried to tell my parents it was him, but they still don't believe me to this day. I was in 2nd grade at a gym class, and all of a sudden I saw little yellow dots coming out of my body. I don't really know what it was like, if it was like a magic spell, or probably just a glitch in the Matrix. I know this won't be believed by most, but I saw what I saw. When I was 11 years old, I used to have a boyfriend. Yes, at such a young age. But that's not the worst thing in this. My ex-boyfriend was 30 years old, and he already had a family, a wife, and his kid. That's disturbing. I wouldn't say weird, that's just disturbing. When I was 9 or 10, I was awakened by a small object falling into me in the middle of the night. I was half asleep, so I just laid back down. In the morning, I checked where it was, and there was a penny on my legs. Last one. In my 53 years, this is the most unbelievable, creepy experience I've experienced. I have a Facebook friend who no longer interacts with me, but whose profile remains on my Facebook friends list. I believe I met his Facebook friend a few years ago. But they are a mystery, so I cannot be sure. On Facebook, they have other images, only African deity images, never their own picture, and has an African-sounding profile Facebook name. This person has told me in the past, enough times, they only got to one concert of the music community we were both a part of. They told me they wish they could have gone to more shows of our favorite music group, but something always comes up. A few years ago, I went to a concert of this favorite group. This guy in line came up behind me and whispered to me that he was the guy from my Facebook who was still a mystery. We took a picture together in line. He hung out with his brother throughout the show. The concert guy bought me a drink and a music CD. I got a quick text later during the concert coming through my Facebook. The guy online could not have made because he had to work and wished he was there. Why someone would hide or deny going to a show of their favorite music group will always be beyond a mystery to me. A few years later, I see the guy with his brother from that show at another music event in the New York area. He tried to greet me. I said hi and waved him away as I continued to take video and images of the event. I do not appreciate being played. After this last event, the Facebook mystery person stopped interacting with me online. To this day, I do not know who was behind that mysterious Facebook profile or who brought me a few things at that concert I took a photo with. After the first event we met at, he gave me a like when I shared the picture with him on Facebook, and he's still saying he wished he could have been there at the show. The guy on my Facebook online lives in Newark, a very criminal area. Maybe he has two personalities or is hiding from someone. Well, I guess we'll stop it there. So thanks for listening. And check out another video. Leave a like or subscribe or comment. And thanks. We'll talk to you later. Bye.